So, what we find is that man hasn't been the best to the environment at all. We've caused some issues. Industry has really caused some issues. But is there anything that we can do? Is the effect of individuals going to be enough? Or what can industry do to help with this problem? Let's look at a couple possible answers. Now, it's estimated that worldwide demand of energy is expected to increase by 40% by 2040. So, not only are we having issues with the amount of energy that we're producing now, it's expected that we're going to have more energy demand within the next 20 years. We know that fossil fuels are non renewable. Yes, there are still plants and animals decaying, but we're using fossil fuels so fast, we're using them much faster than they're being produced. So, what can we do? Well, there's energy conservation. We'll talk about what those means. We can increase energy efficiency. Both of those would buy us some time. They're not getting rid of the problem, but maybe by then we'll have a better solution. And then we also have alternative issues that you'll see on the next slide. So as we look at alternative energies, there's a couple of main sources. The first main source that we are exploring are solar-based technologies. So these are things that come from the sun. So the sun is going to help us provide this energy. So I have some different terms here. We have photothermal. Photothermal is where we're going to take sunlight and we're going to convert it to heat. So sunlight to heat. Photovoltaic, okay, this is going to be similar but a little different here. We still start with sunlight, but instead of heat, we're going to try to produce electricity. And I can't spell while I write, so sorry. Wind energy, you might say, wait a second, the wind doesn't come from the sun. Well, wind is caused by the uneven heating of the Earth's surface. Uneven heating of Earth's surface. Can't even spell Earth. Oh my goodness. Earth's surface. There we go. Uneven heating. So that's going to allow this wind to be produced. And then what we're going to try to do is to capture some of the energy from that wind. Biomass. Biomass, we're going to use plant or animal materials. And of course, the plants get their energy by absorbing carbon dioxide, and then animals get their energy by eating the plants. So it's all related back to the sun. And the last one is hydropower. This goes back to the water cycle. So the sun is going to help evaporate water. The water is going to rain down at the higher elevations, and then it's going to go to the lower elevations. And as it's traveling to those lower elevations, we're going to try to use the power of that water to turn turbines and produce power for us. The non-solar base includes nuclear power. Nuclear power is where we take a heavy element and we split it into fragments. Wow, I'm trying to write faster than I'm talking here, but I talk way too fast. A heavy element is split into fragments. You're actually going to get a big old chapter later on about nuclear power. And geothermal, that one's kind of interesting. It takes heat that's produced deep in the earth. And what we do is we try to harness that heat deep in earth. So those are a couple of the alternative energies that we could talk about. Some we've been able to harness much better than others. But if you remember, none of these are our major ways to get energy. We're still mainly using fossil fuels. One of the major areas that uses a lot of fossil fuels is in transportation. So transportation is about 30% of our energy needs. So what are some alternatives that we can do? What always gets me is it doesn't say, hey, just don't drive someplace. If we could cut back a lot on driving or transporting goods or being more efficient in transporting goods, that could have a big difference. But let's look at some of the ways that the travel industry, transportation industry, is looking to solve some of these problems. The first thing that's listed is a hybrid vehicle. And what a hybrid vehicle is it has both gas and electricity. So while it's starting up, the vehicle is going to use gas just like a traditional vehicle does. But as that vehicle starts to slow, normally we have brakes and brake pads, and it produces lots of heat, lots of friction as it causes that vehicle to slow. What happens in a hybrid vehicle is it uses regenerative braking, where instead of producing heat, we're going to produce electricity, and then that electricity can be used to help power the vehicle later on. An electric vehicle is only going to be based on electricity. So it provides that regenerative braking where it's going to produce electricity as it's driving. And you also will plug it into electricity at night. So instead of filling it with fuel, with gasoline, we're going to use electricity to store energy to start it and to get it going, and whenever you press on the accelerator to make it go faster. Well, one of the problems with this is, where does that electricity come from? Oh yeah, most of our electricity is from burning fossil fuels. So even though you're not burning gasoline in the car, you had to burn coal to get the electricity to run the car. So you have to be careful that you're not just shifting the place where the pollution occurs. The last one talks about fuel cells, where hydrogen and oxygen form water and electricity. So let's go back over our carbon-based fuels, our more traditional fossil fuels. We have coal. Coal is considered to be the least expensive, but we have a lot of pollution issues, especially with sulfur and some heavy metals that are going to be released whenever you burn the coal, because it costs too much to purify the coal before you get started. Natural gas, so that's going to be like methane, is considered to be cleaner burning. And maybe we can postpone some alternatives by switching to natural gas. It's one of the things that they're looking into. It's plentiful enough right now that maybe we can try to wait to try to come up with some answers. Petroleum is the main one used at this point for transportation. It's the big pollution issue in transportation. Transportation is the biggest single activity for our petroleum. About 25% of all carbon dioxide and almost all the carbon monoxide is due to this transportation issues that we have. A couple of alternatives: we have liquefied petroleum gas or compressed natural gas. These are going to be shorter chain molecules. They're not going to be as long as our normal gasoline is. It's not perfect. You'll have to have different storage containers for these, but there are some different vehicles that will actually run on natural gas or liquefied petroleum gas. Biofuels is listed at the bottom. This is going to be your ethanol based. A couple of years ago, it was very, very popular to get a flex fuel vehicle that could run on ethanol, or it could run on traditional gasoline. Right now, just pure ethanol isn't the best solution either. You'll have farmers that are planting corn for ethanol production instead of human production. So that is going to cause the increase in cost for human and for beefs, because cattle are also fed corn. It's not quite as fuel efficient. So some more research needs to be done in this area. They're doing some research on taking waste products such as the corn stalks or sugarcane stalks or wheat stalks that aren't being used for food and then transforming those into fuels. That's kind of interesting research. So I know there will be more research done in this area, but it's not a perfect solution as of right now. At the very bottom it says reforestation. No, reforestation is not a carbon-based fuel, but what this is it's a possible strategy to help. So is it possible if we put more trees on Earth, those trees will help absorb some of that or use up some more of that carbon dioxide? So that's where the reforestation comes into play. Here's a little schematic that talks about biofuels. So you start with a crop such as corn, you finally grind it, you chemically react that corn to break it down into their component sugars. They ferment the sugars by yeast to help produce ethanol, which is then distilled and purified. And that ethanol can be used as an alternative fuel. Now that fuel is going to produce carbon dioxide when it's burned, but lo and behold, that carbon dioxide can be used by the corn as it makes more of the biofuels. So we have a cyclic pattern in this particular example. All right, some end of chapter questions for you, or end of section questions for you. Nuclear power is a renewable energy. No, it is not. So nuclear power is going to use a heavy element, a large element like uranium or plutonium. There is only a certain amount of uranium and plutonium available to us. Radioactivity is a natural process. There will be more that will form, but it doesn't happen quite as quickly as we use it. All right, last question. Fuel use is lowering worldwide. True or false? Oh, that answer, definitely false. Remember, it's expected to increase in all the foreseeable futures. I've never seen anything that's talked about, ooh, let's decrease total fuel use. So answer on this one, false.